important part of your workshop, of your group, into this table, to discuss it and to put it on the wall, because this is what is going to be presented on the weekend and also on our last working session with the directors of the museums.
What is collaboration? I think it's a term that we found and we've discussed that is thrown around often to sort of appease and to tick boxes. But collaboration must be genuine, it must be gentle, and consider people's humanity. It must not re-traumatize, and it must be intentional, and it must be equal, and it must be a process. We did identify that there is a need for policy and framework, not only on a more national and legal platform, but also within the institutions. It's the institutions' responsibility to create policy and framework that respects the humanity of the individuals involved in these collaborative projects, and particularly when discussing the artifacts and the belongings that are held.
When we present objects, or like we also had a quote on the objects, like should we call them objects, or like, because they still carry life in them and culture, rituals and everything. So that's why it's a question that should we call it object or not object.
When we think about the authority of the museum, so the museum puts this object there out of all of the objects it owns, and with that it's an authoritative statement. So what does that really say to the viewer, and how can the viewer really challenge this, and who decides to put it there? What is the reason for putting it there? It's kind of also putting the visitor in this position of having to assume a knowledge. And we not just spoke about lifelong learning, but also the decolonialization of information. If we go into a museum and we just presume and assume and think that we must fit in, it kind of also doesn't really fit in a decolonial way of understanding certain kinds of objects.
We museum makers should think about bringing in new guides. Of course, we all grew up with sort of official guide heroes. In every country, there were certain big people whose images were just put before us and stayed still. Not that. Not heroes, but guides. The people who will bring us in. The people who will let us grasp how they lived these things called cultures. A culture is not something you have, it's something you do. It's even something you are.
We should be careful not to make the education elitist, whereby you bring these objects back, you put them in museums in the big cities, and then the communities which are outside these cities have no knowledge of this, and therefore can't take advantage of the positive nature of this.
And so we looked at our responsibilities in developing new focuses, activities, based on a responsibility of documenting, especially with disappearing languages, songs, stories, and dance.
Resembrar significa reconstruir el significado que tiene para los pueblos una planta y la conexión que tenemos frente al territorio, a los dueños de la naturaleza y todo lo que hay allí presente. Nosotros también como seres humanos, esa relación para mantener el equilibrio.
Having plant species recognized so when you come into a region, for example, Cameroon, you walk into the region and you see plants acknowledged in relation to the objects. So you drive home the fact that we are a living ecosystem, humans to plants to cosmology.
Als Kulturstaatsministerin weiß ich aber auch, dass in den vergangenen Jahren viel dafür getan wurde, mich und andere von dieser Idee in Progress zu überzeugen und dieses Haus zu einem Ort der kritischen und vor allem auch der selbstkritischen Auseinandersetzung mit dem Erbe des Kolonialismus zu machen.
The conference that will take place in 2024 will move the type of relationship that has characterized Northern Hemisphere relationship to indigenous communities and Southern Hemisphere nations and nation states. We are moving into an active post-colonial era. We are not preaching, we are not instructing, we are not attacking, we are collaborating, we are cooperating.